Good day guys, welcome to today's channel. If this is your first time on this platform, please click on the red subscription button to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that when we drop more videos, you'll get notified. So in today's class, we'll be doing a very interesting topic, which is costs. In different textbooks, you see it as different topics. Some call it cost segregation, separation of cost, high and low method, and so many other things. But what I want to make you guys to know in this class is that you see we have different types of costs, right? We have the variable costs, we have the variable cost, we have the fixed cost, we have the variable cost, we have the fixed cost. Majorly these two. Now, what are variable costs? I believe you all know that variable costs are costs that change with the level of activity. Yeah, that means that if I need one marker to shoot 2 videos, of course, if I want to make 10 videos, I'm going to need more than one marker. So what happens if I want to increase the number of videos I make? I have to buy more marker. That's a variable cost. It changes with the level of number of videos I make. But on the contrary, fixed cost is a cost that does not change. They are always fixed, irrespective of the level of activity. And a good example of that is the cost or the amount at which I acquire this board. Whether I'm shooting 2 videos per week, or I'm shooting 10 videos per week, or 20, or even more, it doesn't change the costs of this board. It doesn't change the amount I bought it. So that is a good example of a fixed cost. So but there's another example of fixed cost that you guys might not be familiar with, and that is mixed cost. Yes, a mixed cost is combines fixed cost plus variable cost together. But there are some times where we need to separate these two costs rather, to make decisions. Yes, to make informed decisions. And let me give you guys a good example of mixed cost. Imagine you have someone who is actually the manager of your company, who you pay a fixed salary. So this person is the manager of your company, you pay him, let's say, $100,000 per month. But this person also engaged in selling your goods. That means that he has direct interaction with your customers that will buy, he sells to them, and on each product he sells, you give him maybe 5% commission or so. So in that situation, the salary you are paying him is the fixed cost, while the commission he earns on each product is the variable cost. Join them together, you have a mixed cost. So we need to separate these two kinds of costs. There are some questions, or sometimes in exams, they will give us a mixed cost that combines fixed and variable. They will tell us to separate. Yes, because we need to separate so that we can make decisions. So that we can know that how much variable cost do we incur in a month. That's when we can know how can we reduce it, how can we increase it, what is our fixed cost, how can we check it, how can we so that we can make decision. There is always need for us to separate a fixed cost plus a variable cost. So talking about that is what brought about this topic. I'm talking about high and low method is one of the methods of cost segregation. So when I say cost segregation, it means separating fixed costs from variable costs. There are 2 major methods. Actually, there is high and low method, and there is linear regression method. But for the sake of this video, I'm only going to be treating high and low method. We look at the different questions we might have, different scenarios, and we explain. So let's go. Let's take a question and let's solve together. Before we move to take a question, I would like to explain 1 or 2 things so that you can know exactly the approach to follow when solving question. Now, like I said earlier, I said fixed costs are costs that does not change. They don't change, right? Good. We know fixed costs because that does not change. That means that, look at this now. Let's say I have units I'm producing, and I have the total cost. Now, let's say I produce 1,000 units. My total cost is 10,000. Then I produce 2,500 units. My total cost is let's say 35,000. Now, since we define fixed cost as cost that does not change, that means that even when I'm producing 1,000, the example I gave the other time, even when I'm shooting 10 videos a week, 30 videos a week, the cost of this board is not going to change. So that means that at any level of activity, fixed cost does not change. it is fixed. So you accept with me that when I'm producing 1,000 units and when I'm producing 2,500 units, my fixed cost is still my fixed cost. It does not change. If my fixed cost is, let's say, 3,000 naira, when I'm producing 1,000 units, my fixed cost is 3,000 naira. When I'm producing 2,500, my fixed cost is still 3,000 naira. Now, what does that tells us? What does that rings to us? That rings to us that if I should subtract this my higher level of activity, which is 35,000, from my 10,000, I'm only going to have my variable cost component. Yes. If, for example, look at it, 3,000, 3,000, you accept with me that this 35,000 that is the total cost, fixed cost is part of it. This 10,000 that is the total cost, fixed cost is part of it. So if I'm subtracting 35,000 from 10,000, the 3,000 fixed cost will cancel out each other. So 3,000 is here, 3,000 is here, 3,000 minus 3,000, it is out. So that is why when using high and low method, I'm just explaining what high and low method comprise. When using high and low method, we need to subtract the higher level of activity from the lower level of activity. This is 35,000 total cost with 2,500 units. So that's a higher level of activity. So my high level of activity minus my low level of activity will give me my variable cost component. Why? Why is it like that? Because this 35,000 comprise the what? The fixed cost. This 10,000 comprise the fixed cost. So if I'm subtracting this from this, then definitely my fixed cost is also being subtracted. So that is why you subtract your high level of activity from your low level of activity. Whatever you get is your variable cost, total variable cost for 2,500. Let's do it now. 35,000 minus 10,000, that will give us 25,000, and 2,005 minus 1,500, that will give us 1,500. So the variable cost of producing 1,500 units is 25,000. So this 25,000 now is just the variable, is just a variable cost. Variable cost of producing 25,000 units is 1,500. So I can get my variable cost per unit by saying 25,500, 25,000 divided by 1,500, and I'll get my variable cost per unit. So this is the ideology behind high and low method. What you want to do is to subtract your high level of activity from your lowest level of activity, and you compute your variable cost. So now I need you guys to also know that this high and low method is also called the range method. I mean, subtracting the highest from the lowest, subtracting the lowest from the highest rather. So it's also called the range method. So let's take a question and let's see how it goes. So we have a question. Let's go. A company has recorded the following costs in the past 6 months. So we have the month, production in units, and the total cost. January 5,800 for 40,300 total cost. February 7,700 units for 47,100. March 8,200 units for 48,700 naira. April 6,100 units for 40,600. May 6,500 units for 44,500. June 7,500 units for 47,100. So they told us to calculate the fixed and variable costs and also establish a cost function. Yes. How are we going to go about solving this question? If you want to solve this question, the first thing you need to note is you need to establish, you look for the high level of activity and the low level of activity. And if you go back to our question, from the question, the production in units is our level of activity. So which one is the highest level of activity from our question? Of course, if you look at everything, you see that the highest is 8,200 units. So the highest level of activity. So activity, and we have the cost. So the highest level of activity is 8,200 units. For how much? 48,700. So this is the highest level of activity. The lowest level of activity, on the contrary, is the month of January. 5,800 units for 40,200. So 5,800 units for 40,300. So I already explained earlier that I need to subtract this from this to get my variable costs. So I will say 48,700 minus 40,300. 48,700 minus 40,300, and that gives me 8,400. So 8,400 variable cost for one level of activity. That will be 8,200 minus 5,800, and that's give me 2,400. So that means that the variable cost of producing 2,400 units is how much? 8,400. So what I need to get next is to get the variable cost per unit. So variable cost per unit, if it takes me 8,400 to produce 2,400 units, then how much does it take me to produce one single unit? And that's very simple. You just say variable cost per unit is equals to, what's our total cost? 8,400 total variable cost divided by 2,400 units. So I will have 8,400 divided by 2,400, and that gives me 3.5 naira per unit. Yes, that gives me 3.5 naira per unit. So the variable cost of producing one unit is 3.5 naira per unit. Now I've gotten my variable cost. The next thing I need to get is to get my fixed costs. Now if you look at the question very well, for us to produce 8,200, now if you want to get your fixed cost, you can either use the high level of activity or the low level of activity to get your fixed cost. Anyone you use, you get the same thing. Now it takes me 3.5 naira to produce 2,400, and we have already gotten, or we have established from this, that our variable cost per unit is 3.5 naira. Now that means that for one variable I'm producing, I'm spending 3.5 naira as my variable cost. So how much variable cost am I going to spend for 8,200? If I'm spending 3.5 naira for one variable unit that I'm producing, then definitely to get my total variable cost of producing 8,200 units, that will be 3.5 times 8,200 units. So 3.5 times 8,200 will give me my total variable cost of producing 8,200 units. I can also use 5,800 by saying the same thing, 3.5 times 5,800. So but you can use anyone, you still get the same thing. So you get the variable cost of producing 8,200 units, variable cost of producing 5,800 units. Let's get that first. Going by our calculator here, we are going to have 3.5 multiplied by 8,200, and that gives me 28,700 naira as my variable cost. So for the low level of activity, 3.5 times 5,800, that gives me 20,300. Now this is the variable cost of producing 8,200 units. This is the variable cost of producing 5,800 units. Then what is the fixed cost? The question is, from the question we have been given the total cost. Total cost should be 48,700, and don't forget that fixed cost plus variable cost is equals to total cost. So I've gotten my variable cost to be 28,700. My total cost is 48,700. So subtracting my total cost, my variable cost from my total cost will give me my fixed costs. So I can proceed and say from here, to get my fixed cost is equals to my total cost minus variable cost. By taking this plus VC to the other side, you get fixed cost is equal to total cost minus variable cost. Now this is my variable cost of producing 8,200 units, and this is the total cost I've been given from the question. And this is my variable cost of producing 5,800 units, and this is the total cost. So my fixed cost is equals to, now 48,700 total cost minus 28,700 fixed cost. So 48,700 total cost minus 28,700 700, and that gives us 20,000 fixed costs. Let's do the same thing for the second level of activity, and let's see if we get the same thing. Now, my fixed cost will also be equals to 40,300 total cost, 40,300 total cost minus what's the variable cost? 20,300. So if you subtract, you get your fixed cost to also be 20,000. And that's why I said, irrespective of the method you use, you should get your fixed cost to be your fixed cost, because fixed cost does not change irrespective of the level of activity. Now, the next thing we need to do in the question is said we should calculate our variable cost, and our variable cost is variable cost per unit. We've gotten that 3.5, and our fixed cost is what? 20,000 naira. So the next thing they ask us to calculate from the question is to establish a cost function. And so let's establish a cost function, and let's also see if you want to produce 7,200 units. Let's see how much it will cost us. So now the next thing we want to do is to establish our cost relationship. How do you establish your cost relationship? Let me give you guys a format. Your cost relationship, your total cost is equals to A plus BX. Yes, A plus BX. This your A is your fixed cost because it does not change. This your B is your variable cost per unit, and this your X stands for your quantity. Yes, that means your total cost is equal to your fixed cost plus your variable cost per unit multiplied by the quantity you are producing, because variable cost changes with the level of activity, level of output. So if you are producing 10 variable costs and one variable cost is 2 naira, so 10 times 2 naira, that will give you 20 naira. So this is how we establish a cost relationship: the fixed cost plus the variable cost per unit multiplied by the quantity produced. So from this question we solved earlier on, we know very well that our fixed cost is 20,000 plus. Now, what is our variable cost per unit? We've gotten that to be 3.5. 3.5 multiplied by the quantity we are producing. I can represent it as Q. But if you are the type that's familiar with a straight line equation in mathematics, this is how we represent it: a straight line equation. So that is how you get your cost function. So from this cost function, you can get the total cost for any level of activity. For any output a company wants to produce, you can get the total cost from this cost function. Yes. Okay, let's say for example the company wants to produce 7,200 units. If the company wants to produce 7,200 units, my Q will be 7,200. Then my total cost will be, don't forget that fixed cost does not change, only if you are being told otherwise. In my next class, I'm going to take a question where we see when fixed cost also changes. Yes, more especially if you are taking skills level or Ican examination, you need to know that sometimes that they will tell you that fixed level change when you produce so amount of quantity. We're going to consider that in our next class. So my total cost will be fixed cost, which does not change for this question, 20,000 plus how much is my variable cost per unit? 3.5 multiplied by how many quantities do I want to produce? 7,200. So my total cost will be 20,000 plus 3.5 times 7,300. Sorry, 7,200 units, which is 25,200 units. So 25,200 plus 20,000 will give me 45,200. So that means that the total cost of producing 7,200 units is 45,200. And that brings us to the end of our introductory class on high and low method. Don't forget, we still have some other questions on high and low. We still have the linear regression method to take note of, to also do that one. So if you don't want to miss all the frequent classes and subsequent classes that is yet to come, click on the red subscription button, and I'll see you right away in our next video class. Thank you.